6 injectors, install time, everything else, you're talking at least half the value of the car.
Why do BMWs handle better? It's like if you took away the rusty doors and the air suspension and the hydraulic suspension, right? You'd be like, this is a really, really good car. M-Car, it's got to be a manual. I don't want to spend more than 20 grand. What should I get?
Out of every BMW ever, that is probably the least money pit BMW. E39 was a rough one. Like I get goosebumps on my arm thinking about that thing.
Welcome back to LegitStreetCars. My name is Alex, and today I am back at Fluid MotorUnion in Naperville, Illinois with my guy,
OJ Lopez, owner of Fluid MotorUnion.
OJ is an ex-BMW Master Certified Technician, and now he owns, I like to call it my favorite shop in the whole state. This place is awesome. They work on...
I appreciate that.
We got an old first-gen Camaro behind me, which is where I kind of came from. And then all the Euro cars you could ever imagine. So I will leave all of their information linked down below. They do custom modification work, general repair and maintenance, you name it, they take care of it. So if you guys were around for the last video, OJ and I talked about budget AMG car versus budget M-Car. We talked reliability, we talked performance, potential, and a few other things. And we're kind of gonna be getting back into that as far as what is the best budget M-Car. We didn't really get to that question fully in the last video, and this was totally my fault. You guys definitely let me know about this in the comment section, but I kind of cut him off. I've already apologized to OJ.
I didn't feel that way at all, so don't.
If you guys see my videos, you know that.
Don't listen to that. Don't listen to that.
Well, all my videos, I'm by myself. Obviously, my subscribers know I was a little bit nervous for that video. But you live, you learn, and we are here today to hear a lot more from OJ. He's going to be telling us a lot more about the BMW M-Cars, and we have a bunch of awesome questions from you guys that we're going to be answering as well. And then we will get into kind of the best budget M-Car, because this is something that I am looking for. It's got to be under 20 grand. That is like definitely a prerequisite for me. So we're going to just go ahead and kick this right off with some questions. And if you guys have any questions for us for a future episode, leave them in the comment section down below. And if you're new to the channel, I was a Mercedes-Benz Master Certified Technician for about 9 years. And now I work at a big fleet garage. So we take care of all sorts of different cars, American cars, Japanese cars. And I'll let OJ kind of introduce himself, his experience to you guys, so you know why we're even answering, why we're capable of answering these questions.
So OJ Lopez, Fluid MotorUnion. Basically, I worked as a BMW tech for 6 years. Always had my own thing going on the side, and that's kind of what this turned into. Pretty quickly though, I was pretty young, and people really wouldn't trust dropping a BMW off to a 23-year-old kid. So we kind of worked on whatever we could. And that slowly turned into customers who also had BMWs, who also had other cars, who also had exotics. And they said, hey, can you work on my Lamborghini? And we never say no. So
awesome.
Did say no, and 10 years later, it's this. So
yeah. And you guys, if you want to look up Iron Gate Motor Condos, that's where the shop is situated. It's basically car storage on steroids. These guys have
who have more money than space.
Yeah, right. It's really cool. So these guys get kind of a lot of those cars in this shop, which is fantastic. So we're just going to kick this off with some questions. Some of these are directed to OJ, some of them to myself. And yeah, let's do this. So we have Kier Richard. He asked the question, so the Vanos fix for the M5 is lighter oil, ? New bearings, ? Or what? He said no. Basically, what is the answer to that? He hasn't figured it out yet.
So I'll go over kind of what I'm seeing going on in the industry right now. Basically, a lot of cars are going to tighter and tighter clearances, tighter than typically we're used to. And you see a lot of these cars in manufacturers going to 0.8, 0.20 in some cases. BMW has always had those tolerances on the cars, and they were running a 1060. It's a recipe for disaster, to be honest, especially when you have these cars in all sorts of different climates. The Midwest seems to be especially hard hit. And I like to say, if you really, really think about it, the Midwest has much harsher winters than Germany, if you think about it. You're talking a higher temperature swing. You're talking colder temperatures when it gets down to it. Wetter conditions, possibly. I mean, it's got a huge range of it. Yeah. And a lot of Porsche people are also seeing running into these sort of issues, especially on some of the cylinder liners of the cars, because they have the same material, but a lot of wear due to oil weights and whatnot concentrated in the Midwest. So
Yeah, especially this winter.
Oh, no, I know.
Negative like 20, negative 30. It's been crazy.
When it gets down to those cold days, I mean, that's really when it's doing a lot of those wears or those kickovers. When you first started up dead cold, the battery, it's really working to keep that charge.
Right.
But the cars do not like that.
So would you say then one of these cars that calls for 1060, if they're in California, they could run that all year?
That's fine. I mean, that's what they're designing the stuff for, a more stable climate where maybe through the year, maybe it fluctuates, 50 degrees is big,
What do you recommend for people around
For something like this, I would definitely, 1030 down to a 530.
Okay.
Really, the rule of thumb is you're going to want to run the lightest oil you can for your climate conditions. And what I mean by that is if you're never running the car, once it drops below 50, you're probably safe running in one of those. And keep in mind, I'm not talking just any 530 or any 1030. Like you want to run a really high spec oil, something that meets the manufacturer's minimums for the additives and whatnot. But that being said, I think a lighter oil would do these cars a lot of good.
Okay. But as far as an actual fix for, I know, and there's different generations of this, it's kind of an open-ended question, but as far as the fix for the Vanos and the bearings, like he asked,
what's a fix for like something that wasn't designed right in the first place?
Okay.
But it really just turns the bearings into a service interval, at least a service check, which again, it's one of those things that Mercedes versus BMW kind of sounds a little scarier.
Right.
That being said though, it's an enthusiast car. It gives you a little bit different feel and it's something you're going to have to be prepared to spend when it comes time.
So is it safe to say that basically their fix for the bearing issue was just to turn it into an interval?
It is, but I think if you went at it, let's say the car was brand new, and you got your oil down, you bumped the weight down a little bit, you changed the service intervals in these cars. They're stretching them out to 15,000. I mean, Mercedes is doing this stuff too.
I hate that.
Who decided that? The guys covering the warranty? That's what a lot of people don't understand is that when they come up with these warranty intervals, it's a bunch of guys sitting in a room saying, how can we get the most money while still covering, maintenance plans? It's
15,000 is too much. I get it. Some people are, being a channel that focuses a lot on European cars. I get a lot of people from Europe and they're like, oh, Americans change their oil every 3,000 miles, which used to be the case back in the day.
It wouldn't hurt.
And it wouldn't hurt, but that was a little crazy too in its own.
For conventional,
15,000 is, I go 7. I go 7 on my AMG
7,
cars.
that's the magic number.
Okay.
We say 6,500, but 6,500 to probably like 8,500 is really where you should by that point.
And then you consider how cheap, so you spend $100 or $150 on an oil change. You know what I mean? Like I would
and that's
do it
the
every
thing
5 then if you really like
people
your car,
who don't care don't realize these bearing issues are going on because of the tolerances they're running.
Right.
So on these newer cars, especially like I said, most manufacturers on everything across the board are going to these really tight tolerances where you need to run a lighter weight oil. And because of that, we're going to see these problems creep up for these people who are like, oh yeah, 10,000 miles, 15,000 miles. Yeah, I'll let it go. No, these cars are going to be thrown away. Like
totally, or they're going to depreciate, like we say. So to round off Kier's question for Vanos, I'm going to assume there was different generations, improvements and stuff like that. So
there is.
Could you basically? Is there an updated part number? Let's just use the M5 that we spoke about in the last video. Is there an updated part number, something that might last longer for the Vanos pump and whatnot?
Well, there were updated lines. There was there were recalls during the and then there was things they found out as far as shimming and bolts going as well where they were at. So most of that stuff's pretty readily available if you do a Google search. I mean, everybody's freaking out about it. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to spend money on bearings while they're in there. You don't know what else they're going to find. Are they going to find something going on with the pump, something going on with the lines? So you really got to kind of build it into the cost of the car when you're going to purchase it. Typically, it's going to run you somewhere between, and if everything at the low end, you're probably talking maybe if you're having someone else do it. Now, if you're taking it on, it's different. But having a shop like us do it, anywhere from $2,800. And if your pumps, you let it go to the point where the metal got in the pumps and other places, I mean, it could be a new engine. So you got to be careful.
Right. Okay, cool. All right, awesome. See, these I'm totally going to be branching off these questions because I want to get an M-Car and I honestly don't know much about them. So yeah, that was a really good one. And let's see, I'm going to give you another one if that's okay.
Yeah, let's
go. Someone had mentioned we hadn't mentioned the E92. This is Jared K. competition package, he says, sells for between $20,000 and $25,000 for low mileage mint condition cars. So that would fit within my budget. This is a car I absolutely love the styling. I think it looks amazing. And we didn't touch on this, honestly, because I thought it was way more money than that. I didn't realize they were that cheap.
I've seen a few dipping into that price, but I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration. And here's what I always say is that you're going to be paying one way or the other. So let's say you find a super low mileage one and the value's way up there and it's got all the records, it's particularly cared for. You buy one that, you have a fair amount of records, you're not 100% sure on it, you think it's going to need the bearing replacement. Like, chances are you're probably going to end up spending, well, you might not because you're doing your own work.
Right.
You're probably going to end up spending about the same over the life of the car. So you paid more at the beginning, but you own the life of that car. Let's say the car had under 20,000 miles on it. At some point, you're still going to do the bearings on that.
True.
And you're paying more at the beginning, or you do the bearings and then you have a car that's equally in value. You know what I mean?
What do you think of that car in general? I'm going to assume he's talking about, we talked a lot about reliability in the last video, so I'm going to assume that Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, Jared, that you're speaking about reliability also, because we know the performance of this car. It's an amazing car.
Oh, yeah.
But how would you compare it, because we were speaking so much about the E60 M5?
It's two less cylinders.
Okay.
they do share, like when they designed the engine, that's kind of what they had to do. So they took that block and took away 2 cylinders. Now there's other technical differences, but that's really what BMW designed.
Any
very
transmission
similar
differences as far as?
Most of them come with either the DCT, which just on a whole, DCT seems a lot better than the SMG transmissions. Obviously, Mercedes doesn't run into that kind of stuff, but they do have their new.
They have the MCT.
Yep. But the DCT has proven to be much more reliable, but honestly, that's not saying much because the SMG just had so many issues.
Okay. They had a manual, right?
Well, basically, SMG was a manual trans.
A real.
Just shifted. So they used the same transmission.
Okay.
But, not on the M5, but they used the same transmission on the earlier cars, and they put a hydraulic pump on there, and that's kind of where you get into the issues, is the hydraulic pump starts to leak over time. The selector rods will combine, the sensors can fail. A host of issues. The fluid can get bad. Really everything could go wrong on those cars.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where if you're looking for a BMW, again, if it's an SMG, you got to build it into the price.
Right. You were telling me if it's a $10,000 car, it's really a $30,000 car.
Exactly.
You got to save that money.
You got to think about it differently.
No, that's awesome. Okay, cool. So let's see. I'll take one of these. Oh, so I get this question a lot, and I wanted to get your input on this too. So I get asked a lot if I'm ever going to get an M275 engine, the bi-turbo, twin turbo, however you want to put it, V12 that has been out forever now. It came out in 2003, and it's technically under a new designation now, but the architecture is the same. They've obviously updated it through the years. But for those of you out there wondering, this is the twin turbo V12 that came in cars like the S600, the S65, the SL65. Basically anything that had a V12 in it came with this engine. And I get asked a lot, when are you going to buy one of these cars, and what is the reliability, the tunability, and stuff like that? So my short answer is that I love the engine. I do plan on getting one of these cars on the channel because I think they're amazing. This engine, there's a reason why it's been around for so long, and how they're just kind of just
12 years unchanged, something like that.
Yeah, something like that, where it was totally unchanged, and then they just recently kind of within the last few years. This is totally crazy. But just this morning, I'm like hanging out, searching the web, whatever. Did you hear they're discontinuing the V12 in the S-Class?
Yeah.
This is like news that I think just came out, like as we're...
Yeah, I think it's today, actually.
Yeah, today. I'm like, oh my, that's crazy. So I'm going to assume they're going to keep it in other cars, maybe, but
we'll
what
see.
other cars?
I think the push is...
Really, they're going to get
emissions,
gone. So it's kind of a sad day in automotive history. But yeah, I do plan on getting a car with the M275 engine. As far as reliability with those engines, the engine itself was bulletproof. It was a fantastic, somewhat, we're talking the engine, like the internals and everything, kind of a basic engine, nothing
for us,
too crazy.
Us Beamer snobs, we used to look at that thing and be like, oh, look at how they're making the power. They're using a single cam, and it's just real simple, and they're just sticking a turbo on there and filling it with a bunch of air and fuel, But over the years, it's proven itself that not a whole lot goes wrong with it. I
No.
mean, some electrical stuff that can be, that could be kind of pricey. The coils,
packs that comes to mind,
the
that's
module or whatever.
Yeah.
And then throttle bodies I've had issues on too.
I haven't seen too much with the throttle bodies, but the coils were huge. These things have 2 huge coil packs, one on each bank, and they're like $1,000 still each. And they do go bad, but what I saw at the dealership was people would come in for just like having spark plugs replaced, and these things are just so fragile. At least maybe the earlier ones are. I don't know if they've updated them since, but it was almost like if there was a point where we were warning some of the clients, like, hey, we're going to do plugs. It's going to break. It's got 60,000 miles. It hasn't been touched. We might break these coil packs. So like you almost had to work it in. I mean, you could obviously get them out if you were being very gentle, but something to think about. So you got a couple grand worth of coil packs. Luckily, they are really easy. Right up on top, I think they pay an hour or something like that. Another issue, they had a coolant. I don't know if you guys have done the coolant. The turbo
O-rings
pipe.
to the turbos and all that. Yep.
So that requires a lot of work. That's kind of.
It is, but not
it's
not in comparison to like some of the like BMW stuff when you have an issue. Like it actually is pretty tame. Like
it's not. How many hours is that job? I think that doesn't pay that much. I think
it doesn't.
I remember doing them under warranty.
Yeah, I know, but killed. I mean, like you're probably talking somewhere like 11 hours, something like that.
I remember 7.5 warranty plus diagnosis. Anyway, a day if you know what you're doing, maybe a weekend or something if you've never done it, whatever. But the parts are cheap. And then engine mounts. I forget when the brake was, but
all the time.
Yeah, the engine mounts go bad on the V12s a lot. Honestly, though, like most of the Mercedes,
they go
with
bad.
The fluid mounts.
Trans mounts.
They go bad.
Pretty much, if you buy a Mercedes and you got like a vibration in it, chances are
it's the engine
mounts, trans mount.
Luckily, the engine mount itself for the V12 is not an expensive part, but some of the cars required you to drop the engine, and then at some point, I don't remember the brake, but you didn't have to drop the engine anymore. You could just take the exhaust off. So I guess if
both of those are kind of labor intensive for somebody without a lift.
Totally. But I mean, at the end of the day, you're looking at, you could possibly have a coolant leak at the turbo, bad ignition coils, and bad engine mounts. But as far as the engine itself, it's really rock solid. I mean, you could
trans is good too.
And the trans, it's the same 722.6 5-speed up until eventually they changed it. But so great car. I do plan on getting one. I'd love to get an S65.
That'd be the way to go.
I think that'd be fantastic. And what's crazy is the 220 chassis prices and the 221 chassis for the S65, they're not that far off.
No, they're not.
You can get a 221, so an 07 and up S65 for like 20 something grand.
Yeah, it's a lot of car.
You're getting like, that car new was like $160 or I don't even know, but
160 and up.
Yeah, so I definitely plan on getting one of those. It's one of those cars that it's taken a massive depreciation hit because of the idea that it's supposed to cost a lot to fix, which it would for most people. Like the brakes are really expensive and stuff like that. But for me, especially because I kind of know a little bit about them, I definitely plan on taking that on. 20 something grand for that kind of car. And then guys are tuning those things. And
it's pretty
down
easy.
Like 600 wheel, like with a tune.
It's pretty easy to tune it. Not for emissions, but do something to the exhaust and
take the cats off.
Yeah, and basically you can crank out almost 100 horsepower pretty easy.
Yeah, right. Some guys do turbos.
Some guys do turbos, and that puts you like knocking on the door of like, you can get these things like stock bottom end close to 900 horsepower.
Yeah, it's insane. It's
nuts.
insane. I mean, they idle so smooth. It's such a massive engine. It can take a lot of power. So yes, I plan on getting a V12 twin turbo Mercedes hopefully soon. Let's see. This one I will throw back to you, OJ. We have, okay. So this is a comment / question. Hard to walk away from the V10. He's talking about, the E60. Low mileage, but what do you think of a meticulously maintained E39? Is that the smart buy?
Oof.
I guess reliability, right?
BMW and reliability don't go together. I mean, it's a BMW at the end of the day. They're enthusiast cars. So what does that mean? Like, consider owning a car a hobby, right? When you take on a hobby, do you spend money and expect to never spend money in that hobby again? You kind of got to master it. You get better at it. You keep doing it. And even though it's car ownership, it's a hobby.
Yeah.
These cars give you, they reward you with the feel. Actually, some of their resale values for really clean ones, if you compare them to some of the Mercedes, they do pretty well. Look at some of the old Air 80s cars, like the E28 and those cars, like clean ones now, like they're I keep seeing them bump into the 50s. Like it's getting pretty goofy.
I think
like
that manual trans option that BMW always had over Mercedes was awesome.
That, and
I think that helps too.
there's definitely like from a feel standpoint, they do something a little different. The problem is like those cars weren't designed to last that long. So the ones that did make it that long, you know, where you have older cars, they obviously were cared for at a higher caliber. So that's why they command a higher price, which again, this is the hobby, right?
Totally. I mean, from the comment section though in the last video, because I was trying to get a gauge of what M-Car I should get, I'd say the vast majority said because obviously in that video, I kind of told everybody I like the reliability standpoint. I know some people will think I'm completely insane for putting Mercedes or Beamer with the word reliability, but I was a dealer tech and I compare the cars to each other. So I'm not going to compare it to a Toyota Camry. I think someone mentioned in that last video, like, well, if you're just talking about reliability, then a Toyota Camry, that is not the point. Of course, we're talking about like performance cars. So if we were to compare the E39 with the E60 and you had to pick which one is more reliable, I think that's where a lot of people were recommending to me, you know, go with.
Yeah, that is a tough one because the E60 chassis, like as far as the body, tended to be more reliable as far as like the suspension components and things along those lines. But the E39 was a rough one. Like now, don't get me wrong, it is one of my favorite cars. The S62, the V8 in that car, like I get goosebumps on my arm thinking about that thing. It's an awesome engine. Like it is just incredible. The problem is everything that goes with it. Again, timing chain guides, they wear. That's probably 120,000 miles that could eventually turn into a catastrophic loss to your engine.
Right.
If anything happens there. The cylinder walls, alusil, that wears if you don't take care of it, if you're running it in the winter all the time, you're trying to daily drive it. Bearing tolerances, that car has tended to be a little bit better, but again, and that's because they ran higher clearances on that car.
Okay.
But again,
is that another one that called for the 1060?
It called for the 1060 at the beginning, and they were having such issues with it. They changed the horsepower number because they had to change the rings, the piston rings, because they were having blow-by issues, oil consumption issues, and they went to their conventional 530. So if you ever see like the 2001 S62 E39 M5s, you'll see they're rated at like 406 or something like that. And then the like 2002, 2003 were rated at 390 something. That's because they did change the piston rings and went to a different weight of oil.
Okay.
But the feel is more or less negligible between the two. But
yeah, you could never feel that kind of little tiny difference.
At the same time, like they still do share the same reliability issues. Like the timing chain is one of them. The Vanos is kind of finicky. Mechanically, the Vanos isn't a big deal. It's just electrically, the boards that they have tend to fail.
Okay. Tunability between, you could make the V10 car probably way faster.
Make the V10 way faster. I mean, the V10 definitely can be made into a screamer with a decent tune. It would seem like, naturally aspirated, it's probably at its limit. No, you could probably get a good 30, 40 horsepower out of, headers in a tune.
That's awesome.
Which again, though, headers on a V10 is labor intensive. But that being said, like you hear this thing open up. I mean, you've got a completely different animal than
The sound is just completely insane. Yeah. It's crazy. How much are headers for that?
Well, I want to thank Taiwan for coming in recently. And they brought the prices down on all that stuff so much.
Same thing with all the Mercedes.
It used to be Super Sprint. That was the one you really could only go with. And now there's so much competition out there. You could probably get a set for, now keep in mind, you might have to massage them to get them in there, but probably around, $1,600, something like that.
That's not horrible.
For horsepower, and we have tested a bunch of different ones, you're only seeing maybe 3 to 4 horsepower between any of them.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So it's definitely worth it to get something on there,
I did the cheap ones on the E55. They were $950. And yeah, they didn't fit the best. I did have some fitment issues, but like it wasn't horrible at all. Like I had to move around some dust shield stuff. Yeah.
The issue that some of my customers get into is they see guys like, talking on YouTube, oh, get these headers. And then they go to a shop like us and they're like, well, book time is 4 hours to put these in.
Yeah.
Well, it took another 2 to
direct bolt in. It isn't always
to get them to fit. So that's what you're going to pay for. The difference. Are you okay paying in the back end to get them in there, or are you going to do it yourself? you know?
Yeah, big difference. Okay, let's get another one here. We got, okay, this guy says, sorry, I stopped putting the names after a while. He says, I love the old stuff. I love the E36 M3 sedan. Are the S52 motor and trans a money pit? He's asking, are they a money pit? And this is something I'm interested in too, because...
It's funny he says that, because out of every BMW ever, that is probably the least money pit BMW there is.
Cool, good to know.
That being said, it's still a BMW. But that engine, basically, they didn't go too crazy on it. It wasn't like they were trying to, well, at least in the USA version. They took the architecture of the M50, real simple, single vanos, pretty simple inline 6-cylinder engine. They had a few displacement options depending on their bore size and crank they used in them. For the US spec M3, they changed the displacement a little bit, but they weren't high revving engines. 240 horsepower is pretty modest. Bearing tolerances, were within reason. So like they weren't wearing through bearings. So, the auto transes that some of them had the options with, like they weren't the best. But the manuals, just like any other manual trans, as long as you're not grinding gears and throwing in between each other, they'll last a while.
Okay.
So rust issues though, this is
what year are these cars, by the way?
So you're talking anywhere from like 92 would have been the earlier ones. And this wouldn't be the M-Cars. This is just general E36. 92 up until about, I think maybe 99 when they discontinued the convertibles.
Okay.
So that range in there now, they're kind of an unloved, by enthusiast car, just because they didn't really, they seem more like a practice in trying to get down their ability to make money.
Okay.
BMW's ability to make money than it really was about like the ultimate driving machine at the time. However, it was still, especially for the time, like a very, responsive car that gave you a good value for your money. But just looking back on them, a lot of people picked them up for cheap because they weren't loved, and they let them, go too long without maintenance, without taking care of the rust, so a lot of them are beat up, and it's getting harder and harder to find a good example,
Yeah, there are a lot of issues with rust with the Mercedes at that time, and then got even more into the early 2000s.
BMW got it down, I'd say, in about right when they switched over to the E39s, and they've been really good about rust ever since then. I mean, they're probably one of the better brands where I see whatever they're treating their metal with, like they do pretty well. I know Mercedes got their stuff together at about like 05,
05-ish, yeah, something like that.
But once they did, like I don't really see any rust issues.
Yeah, they're good now. But it was like,
stuff.
I remember when I was at the dealer, I started in 03 and stuff. So we were getting these cars in where we were warranting doors. And and it was almost, and on the S-Class, we're talking like at the time, still, I mean, the most expensive car, the flagship. And I remember thinking like, and we all did, it was like, gosh, how do you make $100,000 car and the doors are rusting out? It's like, what were you thinking? I mean, obviously, it was, they weren't, but they had, the C-Class had the issue too. It's like,
and that's the thing.
They cheaped out somewhere. They experimented somewhere. I don't know what the deal was, but it was kind of a shame.
The Mercedes are so decently reliable, and I'm not talking about the suspensions or anything,
right?
But the engines and transes are lasting, like especially in the S-Class. And then you have rusty doors, so you've got a good car, but like you can see into
it's a shame. It's like if you took away the rusty doors. Yeah. And the air suspension and the hydraulic suspension, right? You'd be like, this is a really, really good car. All right, this one, we maybe should have hit this first because this one has time sensitivity. So he asks, what does this guy, you, think of the F80 M3? I'm seriously looking to get one around mid-spring. So this is gonna be a little bit out of my price range. Car I think is really cool though.
So the F80 so far, it's been fairly reliable. I don't know if we kind of touched on this before. I think me and you might have been talking, but the big problem we're having is that so many manufacturers are kind of using the same technology because that's the recipe to get these emissions that were regulated. Yeah. So you got direct injection, you've got the systems where they're recirculating the crankcase ventilation. It's so multi-speed transmissions where they're trying to keep the engine in its efficiency range. Everything's becoming more and more alike. Turbochargers,
right?
And because of this, there's an increasing amount of complexity on these things that as it ages, it's going to be very hard to, do what we're doing now where we're fixing these things up. For instance, I had a quote the other day of, 6 injectors on one of these cars, and it was a 535 BMW. 6 injectors, they needed them. Basically, they were leaking. The car was running rough, but the car had like 230,000 miles, something crazy on it, and it was a pretty decent car. Like the person hadn't let it get too rusty or anything like that. Like,
what year is this thing?
Let's say an 08 or something like that. And so it looked decent. Like it would have been a good, nice car. But the thing is that car's value was like maybe $3,000.
I know, it's ridiculous.
And 6 injectors, install time, everything else, you're talking at least half the value of the car. Does it make sense for the person to put half the value in the car and go make another payment on something they know is going to last them a while? So that's the problem that these cars are having, which is why I'm getting into the F80. Like, it's got a lot of that technology. And reliability wise, like, time will tell.
Right now, they're probably great.
Yeah, exactly. Like everything was when it first came out for the first, 5, 6, 7 years. But that being said, we're already seeing problems with a lot of the technology that is in that car, and I can only expect more of the same. So is it a good car? No, it's an awesome car. I really like the F80. I think they nailed a lot of things on that car as far as drivability feels. I'm not a big fan of the piped-in exhaust note in the car.
Are they doing that on that?
Yeah, it's lame. It's lame. But, and I wasn't a big fan of that BMW switching out because they had always been naturally aspirated, high revving. But again, here's the march towards,
smaller
displacement
efficient
motors, turbochargers, all this stuff. And because of that,
obviously big benefits to tunability of a factory boosted engine is, you can get a tune and possibly gain 50 horse,
But again, the differentiating between, let's just take the German manufacturers, right? Mercedes has a inline six that, or not inline six, a V6 that with turbochargers that they call their AMG. BMW has an inline, like everything's starting to feel the same.
No, I get it. I get
it. It's not as exciting. There's differentiating between some of the ride feel and stuff like that they're doing, but like the more we get, we push
all-wheel drive,
right?
All-wheel drive is it's just transforming the whole landscape, because it's like if you don't have all-wheel drive, you're left in the dust on paper. So your numbers aren't going to look that good, and that's what sells. Most people aren't looking into this that deep. They just want what is going to perform the best. So I saw this with the CTS V Cadillac that's still rear-wheel drive, and everything else is going to all-wheel drive. So it's like, it's not going to be as fast to 60. And that's what everyone cares about. What's the 60? I want bragging rights and I want whatever. And it's like, that kind of sucks for them. Like that car hasn't taken off at all, really. Like the Gen 2 CTS V, and I'm a big GM guy too, by the way, was huge. It was a huge car. But now, you just cannot, the AMG cars with all-wheel drive and all this stuff, they're beasts, but I get what you mean with the newer cars just kind of becoming more similar. But that F80, oh my God. Oh my gosh, it looks so good.
Have you been in one before?
I've never been in one.
Yeah,
oh my gosh, so I love the look. I mean, the styling of them. I love it, and that's kind of what's been bringing me. There's a lot of cars that I can choose from to have on the channel, but I do like the styling of a lot of the BMW M cars. I like the fact that you can get a manual in a lot of them, and that's what I'll be getting. I'll definitely be getting. I mean, I can't get one in an AMG car, basically. So I don't think any AMG car ever had a manual. So
way back. Not even AMG, but was that Cosworth?
Yeah, right. So, okay. So this guy wants to get it mid-spring. Would you get a warranty?
Well, I mean, if it's a 17, luckily
they're still under.
They're under warranty.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pay for an additional warranty unless you're planning on modifying it, and even then, they might not be able to cover it. So try to keep, CPO is a good option too, which BMW does. They tend to be pretty fair with that stuff. So I always recommend get as much warranty as you can afford, especially nowadays, man. Get as much warranty as you can afford. It's always smart. Most, if you get an aftermarket warranty, most independent shops will take it. So, it's just honestly.
You guys take on warranty stuff, right?
Yeah. We take on warranty stuff, and, that's a big thing. Like, I'll tell customers, like, listen, get a car, get the warranty, and then.
And a lot of people don't know that. They think they have to bring it back to the dealer.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they think they have to bring it back to the dealer. Even the dealer though, like, and you worked it, it kind of lends itself to, I want the jobs as a tech. I want the jobs to take the quickest. So if something there isn't exactly, you might not be getting the best attention.
Lots of shortcuts.
You might not be getting the best attention.
Yeah. I mean, when you're on book time, it's
So
it's kind of stressful.
warranty is definitely something that I recommend people get.
Okay, cool. All right, this one I'll take on. This one, and you can let me know what your experience is. I'd love to hear it. The SPC car. So I get this a lot. Someone had asked, is there a redundancy for the SPC brakes? For those of you guys not familiar, Mercedes on the E-Class and the CLS and the SLR and the Maybach, back in the day, they had Sensotronic brake control, which is brake-by-wire electronic braking system. And this freaked a lot of people out when it first came out, myself included. Like I said, I started in 03, which was the first year for that. And, so people are scared sometimes, especially there was a recall. There've been a few recalls. One just came out where Mercedes extended a warranty for 25 more years. So if you have an SPC car, and now they include SLR and Maybach, which they didn't before. Huh. And the Maybach has 2 SPC, control units, the big pumps. Anyway, they extended the warranty for 25 years, so you technically don't have to worry about paying for any of this stuff. But as far as a redundancy for safety, because when you're hitting the pedal, you're not actually physically pushing any fluid to the calipers. You're pushing it to. They're sensing the amount of pressure that your foot is applying through hydraulic fluid, and then they're calculating how much pressure is required at the brake calipers, and it can modulate, different wheels. It's a really cool system. But if it were to fail, what would happen? There is a backup, of course. But from what I understand, it's not that good. It's basically, you only get front brakes. It's a very small master cylinder. And from what I've been reading online, you do have to press the pedal down like all the way. Some guys are saying it's like 10% of the normal's car, the braking capacity of the car, which to me doesn't seem like if you're getting off the highway or something like that and your brakes go out, 10% is not that good. Like if there's a car in front of you, you might be able to eventually coast to a stop, which is what it's designed for. But that's it. That's the redundancy for SPC. I plan on doing a video on this in the future where I'm going to, on purpose, disable my SPC brakes in a parking lot and see what it is. We're going to measure the braking distance and whatnot to get you guys prepared. But so find out in a future video, but there is a redundancy. I don't think it's the best, but to that, I haven't heard of any major, I haven't heard of any fatalities, I guess. I'm sure maybe Googling isn't the best research for that, but
something's out there. But at the same time, even us, we've seen failures come through here. Typically you think oh, that sounds so scary, like something bad. When it fails, usually people can feel it. They have enough time, to say something's wrong. Exactly. So, were you seeing stuff like that at the dealer?
No, I left in 2012 from Mercedes, so I didn't see any straight up failures. But we replaced a ton of SPC pumps. Yep. We had to update the software.
Sensors,
a ground wire had to be moved around.
How about bleeding them for people at home?
So the bleeding procedure, so first off, if you're touching your SPC brakes, and I mentioned this in my last video where I converted my diesel to E55 brake calipers, and you have to at least pull the plug on the pump before you even touch them, because the piston can shoot out of the caliper and it could cut your fingers off. But there's a pressure reservoir. It's got a lot of pressure behind it. But as far as bleeding, there are a few ways to do it. There are a lot of generic scan tools, cheaper scan tools. Maybe by cheap, I mean like $200-300 that can communicate with the SPC control unit and bleed it. But basically you're activating a bunch of different solenoids inside of the pump. We would pressure bleed them. Do you guys pressure bleed in here? Okay, I know some
we do
guys,
a little both. We'll put the bleeder up and then we'll run it through the system just so that way everything's covered, and then then finish it off one more time.
Right. So it kind of depends on what you're doing. Some guys, if you're just doing it for maintenance, they'll just push the fluid through and not activate the pump, which you could technically do that and flush out some of the fluid. But the proper way is to activate. There's actually a procedure when you get into the scan tool, especially the factory Mercedes stuff, where it tells you, all right, press this button and now it's going to shoot out from this caliper. Now close that one, go to the next one. But something, as far as the redundancy, something else I wanted to mention is there a redundancy when a brake line breaks on a regular car? No. You could have all sorts of different brake failures. You could usually
pump it up though enough to stop it.
And they have split master cylinders and stuff like that. But there are some situations where, you could lose brake fluid. And
I just haven't seen a total failure where it's completely, and
you mean on the SPCs?
And I have had pumps dead. I've had pumps dead where, it shouldn't have it, but people get it into the shop. No one hit anything, and that's just in my experience. I'm not saying it's not out there.
So we're going to find out, but from what I understand, when it goes out completely, the braking, it's reduced by quite a bit. You're definitely, I don't think you're going to have any ABS. It's just the front brake. So kind of scary. I mean, I can see it being scary. I mean, if you
Which
had to
is
make
why
it
they took it away.
Yeah, which is why it only lasted for like 4 years in the E-Class, and then they got rid of it. And they went to a conventional braking system and never went back, and they're able to produce the same braking times and everything. It was really cool at the time. But since ABS pumps they've been able to do the same stuff. It's still got a pressure reservoir. It can still activate the brakes very quickly and whatnot. So, yeah, SPC can be scary, but the reality of it is that I haven't seen too many, really any failures myself, and it is covered like forever. Okay, cool. So moving on, and we're gonna get to your recommendation for me because I gotta make a call here on what under $20,000 M-Car I'm gonna get. But let's do one more from you guys out there, and then again, comment down below. We're gonna be doing a few of these where we're answering your questions. So, okay, so here's one. This is kind of for both of us. This is a really good question. Why do BMWs handle better? That's how he started this off. Is it suspension design or tires or steering ratio? He says, what I'm asking is, can't you make a 211, so an 03 to 09 E-Class is his example, handle just as well with conies, some better tires? He says suspension geometry can't be that much of a difference. I dare you to make me a believer against this argument.
I like this dare.
It's a dare. So go ahead. What do you think?
All right, so here's the thing. Like on paper, you take the two cars, Mercedes has the double wishbone up front, which everybody says that double wishbone is ideal for handling in the sense that it could take road deviations and still give you control and feel. Where McPherson, which is what BMW has, it's really mostly about the package they could put in for the cost. It gives you pretty decent stuff, but there's inherent disadvantages of it because it translates more of the feel into the body. It's supposed to give a rougher ride, but I always thought, like, did BMW sign away their soul or something to get McPherson to ride good, and then they used traditional spherical ball steering racks? Like, how did they do all this magic with that? So on paper, the Mercedes should have the better handling capability, but at the same time, in year after year, we see more BMWs as track cars, as World Series car. Especially for this question and how he kind of phrased it.
So he's speaking specifically of the 211 because there are other Mercedes that had completely different style suspensions. That was the thing. Mercedes has a lot of different style suspensions.
Absolutely,
but 211 was not known as a handling machine, even the AMG.
But they gave you a really good ride feel.
You're right,
and
exactly.
that's how, coming from kind of where I see both, I always said, Mercedes gives you that comfort while being able to control it, but BMW gives you that control, that feel, while trying to make it comfortable. So it's kind of coming at it from two different aspects.
Definitely.
You can't make a Buick handle like a F1 car. So,
Do you think, though, for his question, do you think you could make, and he's using the 211 as an example, do you think you could make a car like that handle as well?
I think you can get it close, but I don't think, if you took the same amount of money and put them into both cars, the BMW is still going to have the better, lateral skid numbers.
Right.
And, it'd probably be quicker on the track if power is the same. It just, they put so much more engineering into that feel and doing that than Mercedes did, where, they said, hey, we want a crazy amount of power and we want you to feel comfortable while you have it. BMW really never said that. It was, we want you to, have a car that feels incredible while you're going around the track, but you could still drive it.
What do you think of we're talking about how similar the new stuff is now. What would you say about right now? Would you think of an M5 versus an E63 as far as handling?
Again,
now?
we're getting closer and
closer. They're getting closer, right?
They're both now double wishbone. So BMW's gone to double wishbone, all except for their lower end. They're still using the McPherson, which again, double wishbone is the ideal. That's what everybody says, is the ideal suspension. But
the
to
most
me,
common term people use.
If you didn't know the cars and you did that, what is it? At GM where they blacked out all the logos and that weird commercial.
Oh yeah.
And you got in the cars, I'd honestly think that most people who haven't, don't have a history with these cars wouldn't be able to really tell the difference between them. Now, I will give a little bit of an edge to BMW because they always make sure they try to go that direction where they give you a little bit more road feel, but they feel so similar now that it's just, I don't know, it's just not as exciting as it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, even not being a BMW guy, it's like, I know right away that the BMW is the handling car and the Mercedes is more the drag racing, luxurious, straight line, whatever type of car, depending on what model you get. But I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that BMW had that manual transmission. It was just like that with the suspension, it paired together for like a track car. And the Mercedes just didn't do it. They didn't do the manual trans on the AMG cars.
It's funny you mentioned drag racing though, but because if you look at some of the BMWs back when they were doing the E46 like horsepower freaks turbo kits, those cars were making massive numbers, just putting down terrible times.
Yeah.
You know, they're running like 10-second quarter miles and stuff like that, which isn't terrible. But when you think about like what kind of money, I mean, I would see 600 horsepower E55s putting down, you know, high tens, you know, trying to break in under, in comparison wise, what you put in.
And they're
like,
heavy.
The BMWs just, they can't hook up.
Yeah.
You know, they can't, they're not designed for.
And I'm so excited to get one. I cannot wait to get a manual. I haven't had a manual trans car in years. My Turbo Trans Am used to be a 6-speed manual and I converted it to an automatic because I was into drag racing. And you can't shift faster than a computer, you know?
That's true.
Although when I got it, I was 18. And like when you're younger, you think that manual transmission cars are faster. You know, they feel faster. You can put them in whatever.
It's mostly about you at that point.
Yeah, so then I realized that wasn't the case. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to get to your final thought, under 20 grand M-Car for myself. So someone asked, what would you get, a 2007 SL55 or an 03 E55, both with 44,000 miles? So this is very specific. That is, you can't answer that question. I mean, we're talking about a 2-seater hardtop convertible and a 4-door bigger mid-size sedan. So
in two big price ranges too. I mean,
well, yeah, right.
I mean, 07, 55. I mean, you're probably talking like, at least double.
Yeah, you're in
like
your
for
20s
what you can pick them up
for the SL, and you're in like the 10 grand. My 03 55 was 9 grand with 100,000 miles. So, well, 44,000 miles, whatever. It's still about double the cost for the SL. It only fits 2 people.
Yeah, right.
Like, you know, totally different. But as far as, you know, if you're referring to reliability, the engine and trans are the same, so equal. The SL has hydraulic suspension and a hard top that has to retract. So reliability definitely goes to the E55.
That'll kick your butt, the hard top.
Yeah. But again, I mean, the E55 still has air suspension and it's an 03, it's older. So yeah, totally. Both. I would say get both.
Yeah, you got to make the decision based on like, number one, what can you afford? How many people do you want to fit in the car?
Yeah.
How much money do you want to put into it? Do you want to make it really fast? You'll have more to spend with the E55 than you would the SL just from base, because you're starting out at a lower price.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard to compare those two cars, but for me, I'd get the SL if I, you know, wanted something more sporty, you know, just to have put away. The resale value, I've seen the SLs, the older SLs, R129,
the old
body styles, those are on their way up now.
Yep.
Obviously the older SLs are way on their way up. The Pagoda market went nuts. You know, if you saw any of those.
I did not know.
Yeah, that went crazy, like values. So people get like the whole Mercedes like roadster thing, and that's starting to swing up. So if you're going to talk about which one's going to be worth more in a few years,
SL
like
for sure,
SL hands down
for sure. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I would definitely get both. I mean, they're just so different that you could have both of those cars and enjoy them both.
Oh yeah.
You know, the SL you basically just have for the spring and summer. The E-Class, the E55 is a tough one in the winter if you live in an area like we do with snow, but it's possible. Snow tires. I'm driving my CDI. It's rear-wheel drive with snow tires.
That's really the answer for everything.
It's an absolute beast. Oh, and then back, I forgot to mention, I'm doing coilovers and suspension mods to my diesel 211. So to the viewer who asked that question about can we make it handle well, we're going to find out. I mean, I'm going to take it to some track events. Maybe there'll be some BMW cars there. We'll that'd be interesting, especially with that power range on the yeah, it's going to be so weird. It's going to be a very weird car to
that'll be very
race.
Cool.
Yeah, so excited about that. So, all right, we're going to end with what we probably should have gotten to quicker in the last video, but if you guys weren't around for the last one, you know, I do a lot of Mercedes stuff on my channel, and I want to get a BMW M-Car. It's got to be a manual. I don't want to spend more than 20 grand. What should I get?
Manual, basically, you coming from a Mercedes standpoint as well, you're looking for reliability.
But I'm looking to learn too, though. I'm looking for a different experience. So I get it. I mean,
it's tough. It kind of comes down to like how much car you want. I think kind of covering like the feel I've gotten for you since we've been talking, I think that the 46 M3 would probably be the way to go.
Okay.
Stay away from SMG unless you want to do the swap yourself. That might be a good thing to show people. You can convert those transmissions over through a series and actually save the money because the SMG is kind of unloved. And if you find one with a problem, people end up dumping them.
Okay.
So that might be a good one. You can convert it to 6-speed. It will cost parts, but that being said,
you said it's the same trans.
So they use the same transmission. There's a few differences where the the shift fork is, or the linkage for the fork where they put it in. You have to drill out one of the bores to get the pin to fit once you convert it over with the shifter in there. But it's, for a guy like you, you're not gonna have an issue with it. So it might be fun one to do.
Cool.
But I would look for an SMG, not convertible, just because again you're adding complexity.
Yeah, I'm okay with
the car.
With not having a convertible.
And try to see if anyone had the history of the rear subframe. Again, that might be something that your viewers would like to watch, but at the same time, like if it hasn't been done and you don't know how bad it is, you definitely don't want to find out it's like the whole floor pan, because that one sucks. I mean, it's you're not getting out of that E1 easy no matter how you dice it. But the E46 was actually one of the more reliable ones. Spins up high, did have some bearing issues early on, but like not crazy.
Okay.
No direct injection. It's got all the fun stuff, individual throttle bodies, a decent displacement, makes a bunch of noise, when you get it up, rev it up real high. So they're pretty cool. That's what I would go.
What years are the E46?
So
Again,
from
I'm not a BMW
2002 to 2006.
So just get the newest I can find, right?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Probably. Newer the better. The earlier ones were the ones with the bearing issues, so some of them got covered.
Okay.
It really kind of just depends on what you're finding. The earlier ones had there was a facelift.
Okay.
The better headlights came in the later ones. Usually people end up converting to that anyway.
Yeah.
So the later ones definitely look a little cooler. But that being said, I think all in all, there's regular stuff you got to do on them all the time. German stuff you're used to, right? Like you could have your ABS pump go out.
Yeah.
Sensors along those lines, control modules, general module. But nothing is really too complicated or needs too crazy special tooling yet.
Okay.
If you do have something happen to the Vanos, the cam bolts can shear and cause timing issues. Not a catastrophic timing issue, but a noise, not reaching its target fault type of issue.
Okay.
But that can be done, more or less relatively easily. You need a few special tools, but it's not nuts. But all in all, like as long as you take care of those known issues, they hold up pretty well.
Okay, modifications. I know last time we talked about a supercharger and you were like, no, that's the dumbest thing ever. So, for you guys that watch the channel, I'm going to modify this thing. There's just no way around it. I want it to be, this car though, I want to take to like road courses. I want to use it for the ultimate driving machine, what I'm missing, having these Mercedes-Benz cars. So I'm going to do some handling stuff, but as far as power, what would you say? $3,000-4,000 in modifications.
So if it was me, I would be going to try to turn my car into a CSL. Are you familiar at all with the CSL?
Not at all.
So the CSL was the little bit crazier version, European only version of that car. So what they did is they changed the airbox up a little bit, went to airbox with, it didn't have the separate air intake. It kind of went all part of the plenum. The air filters in the plenum. The velocity stacks are a little different. It's got a big horn in the front. The headers are a little bit different. The exhaust is a little bit different. The camshafts are different, and it makes in turn about another 50 horsepower over the.
This was a factory car.
This is a factory car.
Okay, wow.
So now there's kits and conversions and stuff that you can get to that, and going off to a good alpha end tune is way to get there, which is basically instead of using a mass air meter, you're now using the throttle angle and engine RPM and coolant and a bunch of other,
Does it use a map sensor then too?
The true CSL used a map sensor.
Okay.
You can convert it over without having to convert over to a map sensor by using an alpha end tune.
So you're running no mass airflow and no map potentially?
Correct. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So
that's new to me. I converted to speed density when I did the turbo in my Trans Am.
It's similar.
But I use the map sensor.
Because you know at this RPM, at this displacement of the motor, at this throttle angle, I'm going to have this much power. So that's basically BMW has always done a good job, because if you ever disconnected a mass airflow sensor in a BMW, it runs the same.
Okay.
So that's a check engine light.
Yeah.
So what they're doing is they're taking that table that BMW spent so much time on developing at the factory, and they're turning that to your primary table and getting rid of the light for the the first one. So
I know all about that from tuning my Trans Am. Like I've had to rewrite my entire map a bunch of times when I went speed density, and it's simple. And it's like you can command things a lot easier. It's nice. So that's very cool.
Rev it up a little bit. Basically, they're pretty cool. And that'd be the way I'd go, you know, kind of coming from where you're at.
Yeah.
It's a good learner's car. It's not overly complicated, and it's not going to like sink you, get you mixed up. So, but we're actually doing a V12 E65 that we're restoring from the ground up, kind of similar to what you've done with some of your stuff. So I've got some, remember I was talking about earlier about, you know, we kind of scoffed at the Mercedes engine because it was so simple.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this is one of those cars that has been basically thrown to the wayside because the customer can't keep up anymore. But I mean, it was a 425 horsepower naturally aspirated car. They could turn into screamers. They were using the engine in the Rolls Royce. So it should be a pretty fun, you know, little.
Is that thing here?
Not here now.
I gotta check that out.
We'll definitely have you check it out.
That's awesome. All right, cool. I think we'll end it right here. Guys, comment down below with any of your questions if you like this format. We'll come back and do another episode or two. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this one. I hope it was a little bit of a redemption as far as me not interrupting as much too. With that being said, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe if you're new, check out Fluid MotorUnion in the video description box down below. Most importantly, have an awesome day.